Hey guys, good to see you again.
Hey,
Good to
Jason.
see you as well.
Been an interesting week since we last talked.
Indeed, they all are now.
Yeah, totally. Well, listen, we're all living in a new world right now and, trudging through it, right?
Yep.
You guys doing okay though?
Every day's a little different. As I've explained to my team, it's sort of, this will start to feel normal soon, right? And I think that's there's always sort of a bit of a shock, a bit of adjustment, and I think people sort of gradually, it's sort of a new normal that people adjust to. So I
I
think
agree with that.
that's what we're going
I,
with.
I think it already kind of does. I mean, it's sort of
Yep.
become, we're all in some kind of routine right now, but we got to start thinking ahead, right? So I know, Bob, you're going to be eating your potato chips and what you stocked up from Costco, but,
I stocked
brighter
up
days
before
ahead.
this happened, just so you know. I'm not hoarding during the
You're a
time.
prepper, Bob. I can tell.
I'm always ready. Always ready to eat.
Well, Bob and potato chips and meatballs, right? So, so anyway, hey, last time we were together, we were talking about this idea of cleaning out the marketing pantry, really kind of taking stock of things. But what's been interesting, I think, for me has been watching brands trying to communicate right now with us, particularly travel brands that continue to, want to, I guess, stay front and center to their audiences. And I guess I'm a little bit interested in it because there's literally no transactions taking place right now in the space. How do you guys think people are doing right now? What's your sense of it?
Sort of like, you're right. There are no transactions. It's sort of like this, like there's still some frenetic activity coming out of brands, right? So it's either some amount of transactional information or some amount of sort of information covering the crisis. And it seems a little frenetic and sporadic. And to be candid, it's not that relevant to me as a customer.
Right.
I don't know, Bob. What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a mix. I mean, I would say I see some brands that I think are doing a great job with connecting with me based on the relationship that we have, and others that are just far overstepping. And honestly, I see it personally too. We have Zoom calls with people that we haven't talked to in years, and it's a nice reconnect. It's sort of, but there's something about now where everybody just is kind of reaching out to everybody and trying to connect there, and brands are doing that too. And yeah, so it's a mix. I see some that are doing a great job, but others, it's crazy.
Yeah, but it kind of gets into this idea of like the relationship, right? You talked about Zooming with friends and reconnecting with people, but that has a lot to do with relationships, right? And how those people maybe in your past or a part of your life or some sort of historical connection. Do brands have that with people? I mean, when you think about the relationship with even a destination travel environment?
I think sorry, Rob, travel is probably in a better place than a lot of industries in terms of relationship because it's more, passion based and has kind of that deeper connection. It's a larger transaction. So
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot of components of travel brands that could actually have a meaningful relationship with people.
Could, right?
Rob?
Well, I was going to say, I think a lot of brands, they actually think they have a meaningful relationship with customers, but they really don't, right?
Right.
So their assumptions are sort of off base. And I think one of the things we sort of were talking about last time is, we're not exactly sure if brands know how to have a meaningful relationship with a customer, right? Because it's been dominated by transactions in the past, and this is a little bit new territory for them. And I think a lot of brands, they may not have sort of like the experience or the know-how to do this really, really well because it's not part of their normal toolkit.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's really interesting to think about it that way because there's a cycle that they get caught in, which is, advertise or marketing, push, book, experience, book, experience, book, experience. And nobody can do the book and experience part right now in all reality. And I don't even think people's mindset are there. I think it's very hard for people to project right now about taking any type of vacation in the foreseeable future, even if there are deals available, because I think there's too many other factors in play. So it's like really have to think about what you're saying to people when you talk to them.
Yeah, where is their head right now? So,
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of people nod their heads, and I've had comments and conversations since our last week and the discussion about building relationships. But there's a bit of, so what does that mean? How does a brand communicate? How does a travel brand communicate in a way right now that is going to build a relationship with customers? Like, what have you guys seen that's working or that's not?
I've probably seen more example. I agree with you, right? Now it's the time to sort of build that trust, build that relationship. I haven't really seen a lot of great examples. And I think, part of it is, we just talked a moment ago about, in terms of like the know-how may not necessarily exist within a brand. I think the other thing is, I don't think most brands don't have the right type of insights to know how to engage with us in a meaningful way, right? So that whole side of the equation, sort of the data and the insights and the intelligence, that just doesn't really exist within a brand's sort of like arsenal, right? Because there never was a need for it before, right? So I think they have a hard time understanding exactly what I'm going through right now, and so therefore there's no way they can possibly figure out how to communicate with me in a meaningful way.
I think that's true, but I think it's interesting because a lot of us go on, like, for example, a cruise or some type of resort vacation, or even, I know you talked before about your travels through Europe. And those are experiences in people's lives. And in some cases, the brands are a major part of that. And in figuring out how to create some connection on that is really a place where I think a lot of them get into that transactional cadence, really could think a little bit differently about it. I know, Bob, we were talking, like, we both cruised last summer to different parts of the world. And, that ship and that whole sort of thing is such a part of what we did when we went to our various destinations, thinking about, taking advantage of that now and helping people re-experience that or relive that would be cool, right?
I've seen some good examples of that too. And I think if you think about, just to oversimplify sort of the, some point in the future when we're traveling and people are booking and, planning, that's down the road. We're not even close to there yet. Prior to that is a point where you're trying to build the trust that it's okay to get out. Here's what we're doing to keep you safe. I don't think we're at that point either yet, and we may still be a little ways away from it. So right now, it's not about anything that is, that is meaningful, timely. It's more just connecting emotional. And like I had an example this week. You mentioned cruising last year at this time. We were in Alaska, and I got from the cruise company we were with, got an email this week that was enjoying Alaska sunset with us, and sort of a live video feed of Alaska sunset that, you could go back and relive that experience. And I think, for me, that's the kind of thing where it's like, we're not talking about getting out there again, because I'm not in that mental place right now, but help take me back to the good times and the good memories I had. And that in turn is going to help me trust you as a brand more and listen to you more when you do have something to say about, what's happening operationally.
I was going to say, it's a great example. And even sort of I think this is a good example of the type of sort of insights and data that brands don't have. Right. But if you think about some of the hospitality companies, right, if they knew a little bit of something about me, they'd know that sort of, I'm the cook in the house. Right. And with shelter in place, I'm quickly running out of recipes. Right. But there are some, there's some sort of great recipes.
Can only make SpaghettiOs so many nights in a row.
Right, exactly.
How many different types of pastas are there, right?
Exactly. There's 7 flavors of Chef Boyardee that
he's the Chef Boyardee of the house, right?
Repeat. But I think what's interesting is, it's sort of, people are sort of doing a lot of these like virtual things at night and cooking and Zoom or whatnot. It'd be great if the brands knew that about me and they could send me some of their curated recipes. Like, that's an example of a way, like particularly a hospitality brand could engage with me in a very, very meaningful way that I would recognize, but they don't have that level of insight.
Right. And even like we talked about creating, really, because people have bandwidth right now, individuals like us, differently than before. We're not commuting, right? Like, I'm going to finish this and I'm going to commute to the family room at some point, and hopefully there won't be a lot of traffic on the way. But there's an opportunity here to maybe leverage things like social media to create, like Bob, going back to our 2 cruises, hey, you cruised with us to Europe last summer. How about posting 5 of your favorite pictures and creating like a community? Because social media has become really, in this quarantined environment, a gathering place. But I think it goes beyond just this current situation. I think that, thinking about this from that trust relationship that brands can build with their audiences. I know that this is a unique time, but I also think it's a unique time for people to kind of say, well, how can we reset that, relationship? I know, Rob, we've talked about this a lot over the years about sort of this North Star concept that, you know, companies can consider and never really do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's, yeah, I mean, that North Star concept is interesting, and it sort of requires a whole new way of thinking, right? So you're not going to get to that building trust over time. You're not going to get to that through any sort of push or pull communications, right? That really requires sort of like rethinking how you engage with people. And I think most companies, they just don't have the vision to do that right. And I don't think they necessarily have all sort of the right tools or platforms.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I almost think of it, and maybe this is an overstatement, but there's a virtual travel concept, and you know, now is a good time to start building that out, or at least thinking about it too. Is how do you, and a lot of this, you know, for destination travel, excuse me, it's a infrequent experience, and some of the challenges for a destination travel company is how do I stay engaged with somebody who's taking one trip a year with me. And I think that virtual travel concept is an interesting one that, you know, stay top of mind, because whether it's reliving my past, whether it's sharing experiences I've already had, whether it's, you know, an emotional way to start thinking about where I want to go next and what I want to do next. And the more you can round out that digital experience and build those capabilities now, I think the better suited you'll be, not just in this crisis, but even post-crisis and handling, you know.
Right, but I would also think that consideration isn't just you know, destination travel organizations, but hospitality companies with business travel, with local travel. I think there's going to be a pent-up opportunity of demand for visiting relatives, and so maybe it's a car trip because of the need and that trust factor that we've talked about. In that, you know, the brand knows me, they know what I'm concerned about right now, they're addressing this, not necessarily what the CEO is doing about, you know, X, Y, and Z or COVID-19, right. But like, I'm your guest, I'm your traveler, I'm your person,
right?
Talk to me. And I think where, you know, that comes in is it's got to be genuine, right? It can't be cookie cutter personal journey stuff that everybody talks about. I think that people have an opportunity here to really get to know who their database is.
Yeah. Do you guys feel that travelers have the mental space right now to consume some of this content and have a relationship with travel brands? Like, is a travel brand better off just saying, I'm just going to be quiet right now and I'll talk about it when you're traveling?
I mean, it's a good question, right? And I think it depends how they pull it off. So if we go back to that notion of virtual travel, so for example, if one of the travel brands essentially came out with something that was the equivalent of, you know, essentially TripIt meets Pinterest, right? That sort of highly engaging, content rich, and it's basically, you know, it's helping keep the dream alive, which is what we talked a little bit about last time. I think the answer is yes. But if it's sort of like standard COVID communications, for example, I think the answer is no, right? Because I think the one thing, you know, we've been talking about internally, the three of us, is the notion that a lot of this goes back to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Everything right now is about staying safe, staying secure, you know, sort of connecting with our community, right? To Jason, your point, that's why sort of the social is so important right now. And I think of a brand, if you can't sort of fill one of those two needs, then you probably don't have any business communicating with the customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think it's particularly some of the transactional types of messages, or even something promotional embedded in what appears to be an empathetic message, can really land wrong. And where I think that brands could do an excellent job right now of connecting with their audiences, I think they can also risk disconnecting with those audiences as well if they're I'll use the phrase tone deaf to the reality of the situation. I think we're all anticipating greener days ahead. But again, I think this is an opportunity for organizations to think long-term, not just emerging from what we're dealing with COVID, but also a shift in organizational thinking and building that relationship. So, you know, like you guys said, like identity is key to that. You know, how do you connect? And you have to know who you're talking to.
Right. And have the data to know where this understanding of what our relationship status is. You know, what zone am I in with you as a brand, and how am I going to reach out, or am I going to reach out at all based on that? And I think data to inform that. When have I last engaged with the content you've sent me? When have I last transacted with you? And I think that, the example I gave earlier about a cruise line sharing Alaska information with me, that same day I get an email from another cruise line that I've never purchased with.
Right.
And, that's the kind of thing where I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm open to content. I can only watch so much Netflix and Hulu and play so many board games with my kids. I'm spending more time.
Really? I thought you were insatiable in that.
If I win, I'll keep playing. But once they win, I flip the board over and walk.
You're a board flipper?
You got it.
Yeah.
Choice words too. But that's where I think that these brands should recognize, is this someone who is actually engaged with me, that I've built enough of that connection to have something to talk about now that they're going to pay attention to. And if not, don't be afraid to walk away. It's not a time to blast your entire database and tell everyone who bought anything from you 10 years ago, what you're doing during this crisis.
Yeah, I just don't, I know, Rob, you want to jump in, but I just don't think people are in that mindset at all right now either. So I think it's it's going to land on an uninterested audience, and then you're going to get that. I remember back in the early email days, that deadly read with or delete without reading, data stat. So I agree with you. I think it's a tightrope, and I get that they want to sell, but there's no one buying right now. So I think it's a little bit misinformed.
I think you sort of, I think it's, listen, the type of data that you're looking for just doesn't necessarily exist, right? So there's ways to acquire it, but it doesn't exist, or brands can access it. I think if you want to build trust, I think brands probably do a better job of listening to customer these days. So listen to customers, spend some time, get to know a little bit about me, get some time to know about me and find out that I'm actually the one that does all the cooking in the house, right? So that's a real sort of preference that I have. And I think if they can spend time doing that, I think that will probably set them up to be more successful in the future. But it's got to be a real focus to do that.
Rob, go ahead,
Bob.
Do you think there's an opportunity to capture explicit data and preferences right now too? I mean, obviously there's a lot that you can sort through and get implied data, but do brands have an opportunity to reach out directly to their consumers and survey them on things at this time?
I think they do, but it goes back to, like, Bob, something I've talked about all the time, like the value exchange, right? So it's been proven time and time again, customers will provide a certain amount of data if they feel that in exchange, the brand is engaging with them in a more meaningful way. So I think the trick is, so the answer is, yes, right? They can be doing that, but I think the trick is to do it in a way that's highly beneficial to the customers. And I think this is where the three of us were talking about getting beyond sort of basic, sort of like, owned and paid channels, and sort of building these like content rich experiences where they get a little bit of data from us, that hard to find data. But as consumers, we're deriving some sort of core benefit in that dreaming stage that the brands enable.
And what's funny about that? Like the actual core content. So like if they did something like we said earlier, like a social media site, like it's Pinterest meets TripAdvisor.
Yep.
We have all the content as consumers, right? As the travelers. We're the ones with the family pictures and the Alaskan sunset pictures from our points of view, or, the Vatican or whatever it was that you experienced. And so the brands don't even have to come up with the content. They just have to provide the vehicle to be able to, allow people to share it. And like Bob said, only so much Hulu and Netflix that, people can consume. And I think that, these other medias can really, really ultimately drive that, really great, interesting conversation. I think it's a really good baseline for us to have to kind of move forward as we dive deeper into, like you said, Bob and Rob, like the analytics and the data sets and the identity component of it, because it's just an excellent time to get your house in order.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think there's some things to avoid, and that's, we've touched on a little bit of it, but I feel like it has to be said, turn off your email triggers. Like there is a lot that is happening that's just, it's totally tone deaf. It's, and I recognize there's staffing shortages, there's a lot of things that are happening, but don't damage the relationship by continuing to have automated messages, that are trying to people into that.
I think it's high, to your Bob, it's high risk, high reward, right? I think brands have to recognize, they can do more damage than they can good right now. And so I think they really, everything they do, they've got to sort of put under the microscope and make that determination. Is it even worth reaching out to the customer? I think a lot of cases the answer is probably not.
Yeah.
So.
And that's hard for people. And like you said, using your word damage, I don't want to do any more damage. So I think we've kind of reached our our end here. No, but this is a great
game to lose.
Yeah, that's right. So you've got SpaghettiOs to make, right?
Right, exactly.
Pack them out of the can. Telling you, Bob, that's what's going on. In all the years I've known him, not once has he cooked a meal for me.
Yeah.
But he's allowed me to expense many good meals for him when we're on the road together. So that's worked out well. But no, we'll continue the conversation. This is great stuff. I think that there's more content for us to share, but you guys spot on, right? Like, final thoughts, Bob?
Stay safe out there. Focus on the relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. Community. I think community is everything right now, right? Community is everything. So I think that's a big focus. And I think that's something everyone's got to sort of shoot for every day. Do something community and family orientated every day and we'll be all set.
I love it. You guys are my community, virtual Zoom hug.
Virtual.
All right, guys. Have a good night. Good to see you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.